there in person. What was I gonna say? Oh, I'm sorry that I tried to get there in person. I just couldn't make it work with my schedule. And so this is actually coming to you from China between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. And so I want to do this little presentation. It's fairly short. And then after that, I just want to open it up for discussion because working in the Northeast region or the Northeast area, Region 4, is really, it's kind of a statewide issue. And I really felt that the state needs to be more involved than just every region doing its own thing. So with that, let me move into what I want to talk about here. And if I can get these slides to work, here we go. There we go. And I want to talk about this process that we're going through. And Don kind of alluded on it. But the first thing we did is the assessment findings and suggestions. And yes, I did secret shop all 42 communities over a month. We drove like 2,000 miles. And I kiddingly said, I think about a third of that was on gravel roads, but we did visit every single one. And when we were there, we were wearing 3 hats. So this isn't just about tourism, but is this a place we'd like to live, a place where people would want to raise a family or retire? And then the second hat was as economic development, place to work, invest in, or bring a business. And as Don mentioned, I've recruited nearly $3 billion into rural areas as site selector. And then finally, as a place to visit, but for more than just a day trip. And so we visit all of them. And in every single case in each county, we did a workshop. So we did Grand Forks County, North Dakota, assessment, findings, and suggestions. When we do this assessment, we don't get any input. We didn't get any input from Julie or from Don or from anybody. We came just like any other investor would or any other site selector would. They're going to check you out. And then while we're there, we made many, many, many suggestions. I didn't call them recommendations because I think it'd be kind of presumptuous for me to come in and never talk to you and then tell you what you should do. So at this point, we called them suggestions. We did that in Grand Forks County. We did that in Nelson County. And we were there in September and October. And I got to tell you, it blew me away. It was way more than I expected. I mean, just look at these pictures. This is at the end of the season. By the way, we lucked out. It was in the mid 70s just about every single day. Up in Pembina County, we visited all of those communities. And then, of course, in Walsh County, which is where we stayed during the time. And then we kind of spread out from there. So that was the first part of that, is taking a look at these communities from the eyes of an outsider, somebody that you might want to attract to live in your 4 counties or in North Dakota as a general, from, Minnesota or Iowa or Wisconsin or anywhere, around you, South Dakota. Then when we're done doing that, and that was about 5 weeks, a little over that, plus we did work before we even got to you. And then we did a lot of work after we left. But then while we were there, we started doing outreach with area residents. What do you want to be known for? What do you want in the future? And this was very important. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but we did an online question. We asked about demographics. What age group are you in? Where do you live? So we asked several questions about that. Then we asked people, what do you think the 3 greatest assets are in the community you live in? And what do you think the 3 greatest challenges are? And then number 4, where do you take your visitors? The number 1 reason people travel is to visit friends and family. So if friends and family are visiting you, where do you take them? And then what are your feelings about growth? We heard from a few people that says we like it the way it is, even though their population has been dropping for decades. But then in this survey on the online questionnaire, it was astounding that almost everybody says we want to grow. So it was interesting that most of the negative, we don't want growth, came from local elected officials. And I'm not kidding. And that was pretty distressing. But when we got on the survey and we just asked the general population, they go, of course we want growth. We asked, what would you like to see happen locally, that would make you a better destination for visitors or for new businesses? And then what could we do? What could be done to make your town even better? And by the way, this was a multiple choice. They could weigh in. And for every one of these, we even said you could add additional comments, and boy, did they. And then, would you like to see increased tourism spending locally? I'll never forget meeting one of the local officials that was elected that made a comment like, well, I don't know why anybody would want to come here. Weather is bad 10 months of the year. I mean, these are the things that stick in the minds of people. Or another mayor that said, we don't want any visitors here at all. They take the fish, and we believe in fishing in our reservoirs, your dams, and just went off about tourism. But when we asked the general public, we had very, very, very few people ever say that they didn't want to share their community with visitors. Nearly 600 people weighed in. This is not an official survey, but at least we were able to ask people for their input. Now, this is besides meeting with people in Lake Walhalla, where we did kind of a town hall meeting, and meeting with people in meetings with the Red River Regional Council. So these are just the people weighed in online. And then number 3 is we started doing the research. And what does it take to make something happen? I've been known for, I don't like writing plans. As a matter of fact, I hate writing plans. We don't do studies, we only do plans. And I don't like doing them because I don't want a plan that sits on the desk. So for me to write a plan, it has to be implemented. I believe in writing plans that sit on your desk, not on a shelf somewhere. So I'm writing plans, and believe me, I'm loving writing this one as long as it can be implemented. And that's where the state's going to come in. I mean, it includes your first impression, jobs, entrepreneurial opportunities, lifestyle, education, health. I mean, recreational assets, local attitude, which we ran into mainly from your stakeholders were negative, but your population wasn't. But these are your frontline people, a lot of them. Seasonal considerations, what the weather's like, all of these things. And so I wanted to tell you in this research, all these things you see coming up on your screen were organizations, publications, and others that asked millennials all around the country what it would take to attract them into other communities. So, as you know, the millennial generation is the biggest generation in US history. And so they asked them what their priorities were. And I want to share these with you, and I'll do this pretty quickly. But number 1 on their list was safety. Now, that's something pretty much all of rural, well, even in Grand Forks and Fargo, I mean, all of North Dakota has. But their number 1 priority is they wanted a place they feel safe. That's good news for the entire state of North Dakota and all your communities, including the urban ones. Number 2 on their list was they want a good educational system and childcare. And that's kind of hit and miss. I was in many communities where the schools are closed, they're being bused into other communities. But generally speaking, your educational gets good marks. But these are things they look at. This is their priority list. And number 3 on their list is they want to belong. Now, here's a challenge. A lot of times we will, like, for instance, when we went into Lakota, and I did take a picture at the grade school, and immediately somebody called the sheriff on us. They pulled us over, and, quite frankly, they did the right thing. Because here's some strange guy going around taking pictures of kids on the playground. So they did the right thing. But then about half an hour after that, some lady pulls me over and says, you were taking a picture of my house. Why were you doing that? You were taking pictures. And so when people come into your communities, how welcoming are you? Will you welcome young people, young families? They're looking for places where they want to belong. One thing I want to point out about this, there are more mayors under the age of 35 today in the United States than ever before in US history. The millennial generation is civically engaged. That's totally different than us boomers who were down with the establishment back in the 60s and then somehow became the establishment. And so they want a sense of belonging. Many of your communities, I was in other ones where I pulled up, I was taking a picture of a saloon and somebody came walking outside and said, what are you doing here? So these are the kinds of things that you have to address. Number 4 on the list is cultural depth. They want some kind of art. This is where I wrote down arts across the prairie. I went, yes, we want the visual arts, the performing arts, anything, culinary. And so this is their priority list. They want life after 6 o'clock. I know most of North Dakota at 5:01, you roll up the sidewalks, including your urban communities. But now this is why people are moving to places like Grand Forks or Fargo or bigger cities where they have nightlife. And that does not mean the bar scene. They just want to have life after 6, whether it's a downtown plaza, anything. Number 6 is top-notch recreation, surpassing other areas. You've got a lot of dams. One of my problems and beefs with North Dakota, why do you call all your waterway dams? Nobody cares about a dam unless you're going out to Grand Coulee in Washington State. We care about water. We care about lakes and reservoirs. Yet we market, the Larimore Dam. Why don't we call it Lake Larimore? And so recreation is very, very important to them. One of the challenges in North Dakota, I read in a book that North Dakota ranks like 49th or 50th in percentage of recreational lands. 90% of your lands are agriculture. So that may be something we need to do, is beef up more of those. And I'm going to get to more of this in a minute. Number 7, and this is, the Pembina Gorge is absolutely gorgeous. I believe your state parks are amazing, but even communities have soccer fields. When we talk about recreation, it's not just parkland and trails, it's also local communities, soccer fields, baseball diamonds, those kinds of things. Number 7 on their list is health, particularly for kids. And one thing you have to understand about the millennials, they're having their kids in their late 30s and 40s, way different than the boomers that had their kids in their 20s and 30s. And by the way, these millennials, the fathers are spending twice as much time with their kids as us boomers did. This is all good news. So you can see why kids and health and education are at the top of their list. Number 8 is transportation. Now, this doesn't mean you have to have buses going from every community, but it's bike lanes or ride shares or having a school bus system, those type of things. Number 9 on their list was affordability and quality. So we don't want just cheap, we want it to be affordable. And we noticed that most of these areas are affordable if you could even find a house for sale. And we know that in Grand Forks, the costs get pretty high, and they're moving to Thompson and other communities that are now those bedroom communities. But this is what they want. But here's the catcher. This is the big clincher. Number 10 on their list. Oh, and there we go. Starter home moves up, nice neighborhoods, people that are downsizing. And here's number 10. Jobs is number 10, not number 1. This is a huge, huge change across the United States. Quality of life is leading economic development. Community development, for the first time in American history, is leading economic development and tourism development. These people, if they find a great community like St. Thomas in Pembina County, I think that's in Pembina, over the Walsh County line, is when they find a great community, they will move there and they will try to find a job, or if they can create their own job. This is where broadband comes in. And so jobs are number 10, not number 1. So what happens is, when you say we have all these jobs, well, you know what? I want to know about your quality of life, not your jobs. Get me to want to move there, and then I will look for a job that will keep me engaged, that I can make a living. And so I just think it's really important to understand this mind shift from the way it used to be. So then, and then look at my slide right here. Is it any wonder Grand Forks is the fastest growing community in North Dakota from what I just read the other day, and particularly in Region 4. They're doing, I got to tell you, that they're doing a great job. So most of this is not going to be about Grand Forks. It's going to be about the other 41 communities. So after doing all this research, we are now putting together the action plan. And the second I started writing up the action plan, I ran into challenges. First of all, I believe strategic plans are dead. We want to cut to the chase these days. May they rest in peace. We are doing more with less time. That is a big shift, and with less budget even. And then we're living in a right now, cut to the chase world. People don't want strategies, goals, and objectives. They want a to-do list. And I mean, when's the last time you read past the executive summary? And, and so I don't even believe in executive summary. Tell me what our region is going to look like in 5 years and 10 years from now, population wise, wayfinding, tourism, all of these things. Tell me what the vision is, then give me a to-do list that we can get there. So action plans are concise, no more than 80 pages. The last thing we need is a 300-page document with 200 pages of what I call crap in the back. I'm sorry. And they include how-tos on every recommendation, specifics, details, not generalities. This is a to-do list. When we do these, even the table of contents has check marks. They're fluid documents. And so when we write these, here's the title of our recommendation. This is when it would be implemented. So we put them in chronological order, who takes the lead, and it takes the whole community to win, whether it's a chamber of commerce, whether it's tourism, a downtown, the city itself, the county, you name it. Everybody plays a role. Approximate cost to implement it, where the funding would come from, and we're gonna get into this, and then the rationale and details why we're making this recommendation and how to implement it. Specifics, how to get it done. And that is how you do an action plan. And, I've shown this so many times, that I call this the Economic Development Express. And this is typically how it works in most communities. We have everybody doing their own thing, but when we have one plan that everybody's a part of, whether it's tourism, whether it's downtowns, then all of a sudden we're out of our silos and we're pulling in the same direction. You can see there, we went from red to the color of money. And that's what this is all about. At the end of the day, is tax base. And so number 5 is funding and implementing the plan. So once we have the plan, then we change to implementing the plan. And that is coming right up. And when we talk about this, the entire focus of this is what else could be done locally in all 42 of these towns to make the town, the area, an even better, stronger, more desirable place to live, invest in, and visit. I'd say live, work, and play, but that's the most overused slogan in the United States. But that's what this whole plan is about. And this is where we need the state's help. And I want to give you one more thing before I dig into the details here of why you're here, is these are the 5 factors driving the economy across the country, and in particularly places like North Dakota. And I call this shift happens. And I hope you saw that I pronounced that shift. This is where shift happens. And shift number 1 is this. This is the rise of rural America. If there's one thing that happened during COVID, is people wanted away from the urban centers. They want to be out in the smaller rural communities, away from it all. They get tired of the noise. They get tired of all that. The rise of rural America is coming back. It's been dying since the 70s. It is now coming back. People are finding the value in rural America. And quite frankly, nearly every city and town in North Dakota would fit under the national of rural, whether it's Minot or Williston or Dickinson or any of the smaller ones. And so that is really critical. We want to get back to the basics where things are real. And that is really important. Shift number 2 in this set is this is the work from anywhere movement. There are more than 2 million people that are like us, digital nomads, and we can work from anywhere. As a matter of fact, you know what? This is changing everything. Matter of fact, cities are jumping on this like crazy. I'm going to show you that in a minute. Shift number 3 that we're in is we're in the age of economic garden. The days of smokestack chasing are over. This is where we help small local businesses grow and grow and grow and grow. I mean, Facebook started in a college dorm room. Apple started in a garage. So did Microsoft. I mean, this is economic development. This is economic gardening. This is where we take small businesses and help them grow. And shift number 4 is this. Jobs are now going where the talent is or where the talent wants to be. This, of all of them, is number one priority for North Dakota. Jobs are going where the talent is or where the talent wants to be. So that means that quality of life is leading economic development. This is a whole shift, and number 5 of this is this one. Tourism is the front door to your non-tourism economic development. I've always been dismayed at the lack of funding the state of North Dakota gives Sarah and her staff. And she did not put me up to this. Matter of fact, Sarah, Fred, everybody on her staff is probably going, Roger, please don't go there. But I have to say it as an outsider, that you have to understand that we're looking at tourism websites because it promotes your quality of life. I'm not, you know what? I've looked at the state. I could look at city economic development work sites and they say, oh, we have job opportunities and we have empty buildings and we have all this stuff. But you know what? Tourism, nothing sells quality of life like tourism. So your tourism department is doing way more than just promoting the state to visitors. It's promoting your state to incoming potential residents. I mean, it changes everything. And so, I mean, this is out at Pembina Gorge, out at Frostfire. I mean, all of these things, whether snowmobiling, all these things, tourism is the front door to your non-tourism economic development efforts. And I think the state needs to realize that if we have a love of fishing, we might find that North Dakota is a place we want to live. And now we're going to bring our business there. We're going to start a business there. Heck, maybe we'll even start a fishing guide service. These are entrepreneurial activities that will bring people there, not just as visitors, but as residents and future generations. And so these are, and by the way, every one of these photos you're seeing is a North Dakota photo. That is the power of tourism. And that is a huge shift. And anybody coming into this region or anywhere in North Dakota, all these people you see on the list, they're coming in as what? Visitors. Is this a place our client would want to be? His or her employees would want to be? Is this where we want to invest in? And I think the state is way undersold. And so and then when it comes to true tourism, people come, spend money and head home. We like that. And so this is the power of tourism. So now, this is where I really needed to speak to you about what can the state do? Because this is not just a Region 4 problem. So let me tell you, number one, North Dakota has an image problem. It's not that people look down on North Dakota. I've asked everybody I've known over the last year since we've had this project. And I mean, I tell you, even Jake that works for Red River Regional Council is online with us right now. He came from Wisconsin. And I'm putting words in his mouth, but I think he said something along. People go like, why are you going to North Dakota? See what I mean? And it's not that they have a negative perception. They have no perception in North Dakota. And so that is part of the problem. You're totally overshadowed. Just look to your south where Kristi Noem, is now a presidential candidate because of her stand on COVID. South Dakota only has 100,000 more people than North Dakota, yet there are people moving to South Dakota because of her, and I mean, she's a person that goes out and rides her horse through the middle of Deadwood and then up on the stage in Deadwood to do a speaking engagement, or she hops on a Harley to go to Sturgis. They're getting attention, and North Dakota is just, we don't know anything about North Dakota. When I ask people about North Dakota, they go frozen tundra. You're no more frozen than Iowa or Minnesota next door or anybody else. The only time we hear about North Dakota is when you make the national news, and it's usually when there is a disaster, like I think it was 97 flood in Grand Forks. It's time. And the problem is Sarah just doesn't have enough budget to really outcompete any of your neighbors. And so, I think number one fix would be a better funded tourism marketing program, realizing that this is far more than just tourism. This is about showcasing your state. as a great place to live, work, and play. So that's fix number one. And I'm not getting into money and everything, but I think it's really, really important. The image of North Dakota, it's social media, it's what people say about you, it's the videos, it's the website, it's those types of things. It is the fastest, cheapest, easiest way to get an economy moving again is tourism, especially now post-COVID, hopefully. Post-COVID, we're out there. We want to explore. We want to get away from it all. It's a perfect opportunity for North Dakota. It's an easy way to get outsiders selling the state for you. And some will come here and go, this place is fantastic. I'd have no problem living in North Dakota. Fix number two is you got to help communities develop new websites and better photography, showcase the priorities you excel with, that you have and excel with. And I got to tell you, out of these 42 towns, about 15 of them didn't even have a website. Another 15 or 20 had a website that looked like 1986. That's not going to attract anybody under 50. And some of them did. I mean, it's really poor. So we need to help communities develop new websites. And I'm going to tell you how to do this, because if we want to come as a visitor, or we want to come as a potential resident and we're looking for opportunities, we're going to look at websites. We're going to look at social media channels. When I look at most of the 42 communities, and I could probably do this across the state with all, 400 and some odd communities. But when I started looking at their websites, they did not close the sale. Now, I'm not talking about Grand Forks, Fargo, maybe Bismarck, those, but we need to work with these communities to have a better introduction to people out there. As a matter of fact, Julie's website does a far better job attracting people to Grand Forks than the city's website or than their economic development website. And no offense to them, that's my opinion. I'm not trying to put Julie on the hot seat here, but her website is awesome. What she's done is good. You ought to see the photography that she uses of people on walking through town and in the parks and skateboarding. I mean, those 10 things that the millennials want, her website showcase. The city's website didn't, economic development websites and other Grand Forks websites didn't do it. In these rural communities that have a good school, or they have a health, or to have childcare, their websites don't say anything that's going to attract anybody. It's like, would you like to see the minutes to our last meeting? So you have to understand helping them through this process. And then we need to develop recreational, maybe public-private partnerships. Maybe the state needs to purchase recreational lands. I mean, everywhere I went, I see pictures like this. I think this was in Nelson County. I said, is there a way we could go to this private property owner and develop a trail along this goes into one of the dams, or out, this is the outflow to one of the dams. And I kept going, could we put a trail system on there and market it? And it would be a public-private partnership. They can still have their cattle roam there. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out a way, because recreational, when you rank almost dead last in recreational lands, and by the way, what percentage of those is in Western North Dakota versus Eastern North Dakota? See, these are challenges, but look at what you have to offer. Maybe there's public-private partnership for hunting season, for bird hunting season, or even wildlife viewing or bird watching. These are all pictures I took this last October. These counties are stunning, yet most of your best assets are private. We do have some great museums. You do have some great waterways, but so does Devil's Lake, which is how do you outcompete that? When I watch the news in Fargo and they talk about the weather in Devil's Lake, they don't ever mention the Lake Larimore or Stump Lake. They're mentioning those big things. And so that would be another fix. So that is about image. It's promoting these. When I was out speaking to all these communities, I showed them photos we took, and people would come on and say, wow, I didn't realize we lived in such a beautiful place. And that brings me to this apathy. I mean, it seems like North Dakota is not very proactive. Everything seems to be reactive. And I'm talking about all these rural communities. I never met so much apathy like, well, this is who we are, or we have bad weather 10 months of the year, or why would you want to move here? And I just thought we've got to change this. We got to start with elementary schools. You know, Jacob Schmuck used to work for the Red River Regional Council, and he is a born native North Dakotan. And he said from the time he could even walk, his parents would talk down North Dakota. He'd go to school and say, yeah, are you sorry you have to live here? And the second we graduate, we're going to blow this area. I mean, it's just kind of a pervasive problem in North Dakota that has to be fixed. This is a statewide program where you need to start in elementary schools. You know, did you know? I love when I went to Sarah's when I went to the state tourism website, and she has but did you know that North Dakota leads the country in, I can't even remember what all they were, half a dozen crops. Those little did you knows elevate North Dakota in the minds of all of us that live around the rest of the country. And I think you need to start this in elementary school. So when these kids grow up, they have pride in their own state and in their own community. And I don't see it with your people that are in their 50s, 60s, you know, what I call the good old boys network. That is starting to change. And so this is another program. Number 5, assist with the unincorporation of many small cities. Out of the 42 communities in this region, I would say that there's 10 or 15 that should not even be incorporated. They should fall under county. They pretty much contract with the county for all their services anyway, but they can't even afford to unincorporate their towns. So maybe the state needs to come in and help these communities unincorporate so they can be part of the county. They can still have their own community. We're not talking about amalgamation of taking away the towns, but they don't have any tax base to do anything with. And so these are things where the state can really help. The third thing I want to point out is jobs and opportunities. When I keynoted at the North Dakota Main Street, I met the governor and I talked to him for about 10 minutes. And he or one of his aides made a statement to me that stuck with me. He said, we have 60,000 jobs in North Dakota that pay $100,000 a year or more. Where are they? Where are they? I can't find them. Am I supposed to go to Indeed.com? Am I supposed to go to Monster.com? Where are these jobs at? I keep going, where are all these jobs at? You know, I thought maybe Department of Commerce needs to do a statewide website that's dedicated by region of job availability, entrepreneurial and investment opportunities. We're in Region 4. I went to Indeed.com. I didn't see ads for Marvin Windows. I didn't see ads for Northrop Grumman. I didn't see ads there. What I saw was a bunch of short order cook ads, frontline employee ads, because they're probably doing their own recruiting, however they do it at those and other big employers. But I don't know how I thought if the state had a clearinghouse where the major employees could post these jobs, they don't have to be 100,000. Remember, we're looking for any way to make a living so we can enjoy your quality of life. You know, I just thought you could do jobs there. You could also do entrepreneurial opportunities. There might be great opportunities that exist in some of these communities where people just don't know that it even exists. You know, I could see fishing guide services. I could see ice fishing rental gear and equipment, you know, you name it. I mean, there's tons of opportunities, I believe. And so maybe that's something we need to do. And it's possible the state's already doing this. And that's why as soon as I'm done with this, and you're probably saying, when's he ever going to get done? Is I want to talk about these things. Number 4 is those first impressions. So let's say we got new websites. Let's say tourism gets more funding so they can do even better job promoting. And I shouldn't say better job. I should say that they can spread out their effort to cover a bigger base of people you're trying to attract in. But let's say the communities get new websites. They get new photography. We get people on YouTube doing a North Dakota YouTube channel that has little sound bites or even just rendezvous region. I could see a young person going out there and doing little sound bites of the top 5 things to do in rendezvous region during the winter months. So let's say we do all that marketing. We do all of those things. We sell better first, and now they're coming. Now comes the next step. What happens when they arrive? And that is first impressions. And I got to tell you, you have a program called Accelerated North Dakota, which did not get funded. I think it was like $21 million. I think you could do this for a whole lot less. And I'm going to get to that. But you need, and that was about doing this, getting rid of non-compliant properties, commercial and residential. Yeah, you can use the word eminent domain where necessary, but I think in these 4 counties, I saw hundreds and hundreds of homes and commercial buildings that are no longer habitable at all. They're abandoned. A lot of these people, you need to get these properties. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go eminent domain. I'll bet you lice property owners would be glad to get rid of their properties, because eminent domain does not mean you're taking anybody's property. You're paying the assessed value for it. I've seen states that have done eminent domain properties where they pay the assessed value plus 10%. But what's in it for them? If a person was going to get rid of this building, what's in it for them? You would waive delinquent taxes or utility bills. So you could waive it if they will sell you the property. It eliminates their risk. Almost every property you're about to see, and these are just a few, pose a public health and safety risk. And then number 3, they get cash for an otherwise worthless property. You're going to get rid of this, whether it has asbestos or lead paint, or it's just a health hazard or a safety risk. A lot of these, I mean, I'm not even going to tell you what towns he's in. A lot of these could probably be sold for barnwood, where people come in and they sandblast it and they sell the wood for barnwood, probably be worth a fortune. I found dozens of abandoned churches. I mean, here's a whole block in one of the towns. This would be a great redevelopment. So I'm not saying tear this one down, but maybe we purchase this and we flip it. I believe in development authorities. Development authorities could be created under the region to go in and purchase properties like this and then flip them, turn them around, get rid of the lead paint, reinvest them and put them back, invest in them and put them back on the tax rolls. I mean, there were so many of these. There were hundreds of buildings like this. I mean, I'm just showing you a few. These are the larger ones, but I can't tell you, when you're going right down highway, what is it? The business route for 29, and you're going along, and this is what you see. Many of your communities, this is the introduction. I mean, you can't do this. These are in some of these little towns that are really have tremendous potential. When we did that online questionnaire, I can't believe how many people said, please help take down these old buildings. Our kids go crawling around in them. We don't want them to do that. It makes our town look like it's dying, and so this is over and over and over. So remember, we could spend a fortune marketing North Dakota. We can bring people there. If this is what they're going to see, are they just going to turn around and go back and then we wasted all our money? That's what we don't want to have happen. I mean, and this was prevalent everywhere. I could show you this all day long. I could show you hundreds of these. And these are what stick in the minds of people. But wouldn't it be great if you could erase these properties? Just erase them. They're not habitable. Sell the wood, get rid of them. And then I'll tell you what you do next, coming right up. But you could just see that this is prevalent everywhere. I mean, it was, and this is the introduction to one of the communities. When you go right up, it says, welcome to this town. This is what you see. And I'm not even showing you the dozens of abandoned cars and trucks and vehicles next to this building. I mean, don't paint North Dakota into this corner. You've got to do something. If you want to accelerate North Dakota, I think that program is right. I love this. This is not a teardown. This is somebody, I think this is a private residence, if I remember right, that used to be a public school. And look at this. This is a magnificent home. I mean, it's just fantastic what you can do. I mean, here in Gilby, I don't know, private investors, I'm looking into all this. They took a school and turned it into apartments. These are so not all of these are tear downs. A lot of these are redevelopment opportunities that could all take place. under a program like this. And then finally, my last one is closing the sale. So now you got to come. If we can start cleaning up these small towns, getting rid of the eyesores or offering them up to redevelopment, because in many of these 42 towns, I would go onto realtor.com, onto Zillow.com, and there'd be no properties for sale. Yet in the middle of their town, there's 30 places that should be torn down and redeveloped. And I heard this over and over and over again. Good luck. If I wanted to work here, where can I find a house? Where can I find one? And so here is a fix. I would love to see the state of North Dakota do a homesteading act. And let me explain this a little bit. And maybe there's one there somewhere, but this would be like other cities doing this. Tulsa. I'm right near Tulsa right now. You know what they're doing? They are paying people $10,000 in cash to move there for 2 years and work remotely. They'll even give you free desk space. They'll give you exclusive perks and events. They are a welcoming community. Tulsa, they're paying people $10,000 just to move there. I think you could do better. But let me keep going. This is Tucson, Arizona. Ready to make a change. Tucson is a great city, live, work, and play. And we're here to roll out the red carpet. And what are they doing? They're giving you exclusive benefits and perks, relocation assistance, like $7,500 just to move there. And then they will hold your hand through the process. I mean, Topeka, Kansas is paying people $15,000 just to move there for 2 years and work remotely. If cities and by the way, there are even smaller cities are doing this, but I'm thinking, wow, would I pay somebody $15,000 to go there, rent a house, work for 2 years and then leave? They're hoping that some of these people actually say, I love it here, I'm staying put, and now I'm going to buy a house. But I think what would be even better is if in North Dakota, if you can buy some of these properties, you're not buying them just to get rid of them. You're buying because it creates a new home opportunity. So wouldn't it be cool if you said, if you will move to North Dakota, we will give you a piece of property. There are some strings attached, but we'll give you a piece of property. Remember, you bought these. It could be commercial pieces of property. It could be residential. We've gotten rid of whatever was there, or we have some that could go into redevelopment. But we will give you, if you will move to North Dakota, we will give you a fee of a piece of property. This is good incentive to attract people. And on that site, if it's empty, you have to build a home. It needs to be stick built. We're not going to put mobile homes or RVs on them. You need to build a stick built home. It could be a modular home, but it must be stick built. And it needs to be at least 1,100 square feet. See what I mean? You can put together your strings. I'm not saying this has to be it, but you have to start it within 18 months of you getting the piece of property. So we'll give you a year and a half to get situated, to get your plans, to get permits, all of these things. This is another reason why some of these cities need to be unincorporated, so we can go straight to the county for permitting and those types of things. And then it must be completed within 30 months. The last thing we want to see is blue tarps over buildings, even homes. And then you might say, and we have financing packages available locally. This will be private sector, but we'll even help you find the financing for your new home. And then this could be commercial or residential. You know what's good about this? By giving away free property, we're going to repopulate our rural communities. Number two, and people want rural communities. Number two, we're going to create construction jobs, whether it's residential, commercial, even if we're going in and revitalizing buildings in little downtowns everywhere. And the governor said one of his top 5 main objectives was Main Street. I remember having that conversation with him. Well, even these little towns have little main streets of half a block long or block long. All of those create great business opportunities. And so I think if North Dakota did this, you're not just getting people for 2 years and they're leaving, but let's say somebody comes in, gets a free piece of property, they build an 1,100 square foot house or a 1,500 square foot house, and then they decide to sell it and then build another home on another piece of property, or keep that one, but they want to build another home for sale. That's great. We're all about this. We're all about growing our population. So if we do a good job marketing, we do a good job getting people to come to North Dakota, then we have a good first impression. And then we give them opportunities, incentives like this. This will work. This will work. And the reason I know it will work is because I have done it before. I mean, so if you did better funded tourism marketing, put the state on the map, that would be a state initiative. If you did a North Dakota Plus, that's what I just nicknamed it. This would be the state would help fund it, but the regional councils would do this. Now let me say one thing about regional councils is, first of all, I don't believe in throwing money and hoping it sticks at things. I mean, how many people come to you as state officials or county officials or city officials wanting handouts? In all of these things, the regional council would physically do the work. They're not handing out grants. Here's a grant for you to do a new website for your town. No, the regional council will have a great template to work from where they will actually help the community develop their website, their photography library, their video library. This is hands-on, into the ground working. This works. So the state might do this. And by the way, you have 8 regional counties, you have 8 regions. I would rather see you do this regionally than work with 53 counties. It's like herding cats, or 400 communities. So wouldn't it be great if you could do each region that has a plan like this, if they could implement this? I mean, a jobs and opportunity could be state, but it could be the regional councils are the ones that put those jobs. We go talk to our major employers, whether they're hospitals or governments, or in the case of Grafton, Marvin Windows, or any other major employers. And they would help feed that to the state's website that would be promoting these jobs. And they just say, what area of the state are you most interested in? And then there would be their job listings and business opportunities. Funding redevelopment projects would be the regional councils. They need the funding to do this, but I can't see the state going around condemning properties, getting into eminent domain and all that. That is something you could do on the local level. And the first thing to do is work with property owners that have abandoned properties they'd be happy to get rid of. I wonder how many of these, and I'll bet you there are hundreds just in Region 4 of vacant properties sitting there that people don't even remember that they even own. So the regional councils would have some funding to do this locally so that it is not done on a state level. That's where politics gets in and kills this kind of effort. And this, I call this redevelopment, whether it's redeveloping existing properties or getting rid of properties that are no longer habitable. And then market homesteading. The regional councils could even do this. And so working with 8 regions, and you know what? I would love this to be the state's pilot program. I even thought if you could fund all 8 of them $1 million a year for 5 years, that'd be $8 million a year. So that'd be $40 million over 5 years. And the state may say, oh my gosh, we're way more fiscally conservative. We can't afford that. Well, you know what? And I would only fund them if they have an action plan like this that tell you how to better market the area, that make it easy to find jobs in the area, that create great places for them to live and great redevelopment things. This is the kind of plan that will work. And it has worked in Nevada, where I've worked, in New Hampshire, where I've worked, in Utah, where I've worked, and in other states. This works. But you may say, well, gee, can we really fund that? Well, here's the return investment to the state. Number one, you're going to increase your population and new home starts, particularly in your rural areas. Okay. And by the way, you might even say, okay, for this kind of funding, it's going to be for communities of, let's say, 15,000 and below. Grand Forks, is probably doing fine on its own. We don't need Grand Forks and Fargo and Bismarck applying for these funds. This is really to start spreading out and repopulate your rural areas. Additional recreational assets that you can leverage, whether it's public, private, or whether the public starts buying more recreational properties. Dramatically increase tourism spending, increase local commercial development, increase tax base, the valuations of property values, removal of blighted properties, young families returning to the state, not saying the day I graduate, I'm blowing this down, which we heard everywhere we went. It's improving educational health options, and you're going to create a new attitude. People are begging for this, and you will create a new perception of North Dakota. And then finally, this is a fantastic state. There's never, ever been a better time to do this. And I'm sorry that took way long. I was going to try to do that in 20 minutes and I went way over that. But I just think that this is such a tremendous opportunity. And I think the regional councils are the vehicle to make this happen. These 4 counties have a total population of about 100,000. If you take Grand Forks proper out of there, it brings it down to about 33,000, I think, in the whole region. And these communities need help. Some of them, there's not much left, but there's still places they can grow. There's still opportunities for young people. I've run into people that are young. They may say, man, we have a young group of friends and we have 4 families and we've always wanted to go in a small town where we could make a difference. We'd love to have 4 pieces of property. We could all be neighbors. We could build our homes together. We could start a business there or bring our business there. A lot of these are online businesses. Media influencers. I could go through the whole thing. I even did a webinar on Zoom towns. That's what we're really talking about here. If you ever need to, in the Destination Development Association, we have a video library, and I did a whole video on Zoom towns. That's what we're talking about doing in rural North Dakota. And so with that, that's all I got for you in this. I'll still share my screen in case you want me to go backwards, but now I would love to just open this up. I don't know where to start. We want to make these recommendations for Region 4, but the last thing I want to do is hand Dawn a plan. And she goes, Roger, I have no funding to implement any of this. I mean, the Rendezvous region, let me say one more thing. The Rendezvous region is Region 4. And by the way, people don't go to regions. That's our internal working is Region 4. But I'll bet you if we interviewed 1,000 people in these 4 counties and said, do you know what or where the Rendezvous region is? I would bet that you might find one person in the 1,000 that's ever even heard of it. Because we know about it as insiders. We know about it in tourism, Red Regional Council, and the people, that might be in tourism. But how do we tell the locals? Remember, the number one reason we travel is visit friends and family. You know what we need to do? We need to put billboards on Highway 2, on Highway 29 that say, welcome to the Rendezvous region. And then put, here's the top 5 must-do activities, rendezvousregion.com, or the top 5 fishing spots, rendezvousregion.com. And this is not to just educate people coming down from Manitoba and north from Fargo. This is to educate people in the region about where they live. And even if they go to the website and they find the top 5 must-do attractions or the top 5 bass fishing or walleye fishing spots, I mean, you're starting to change the perception right there. But you know what? Their annual budget's like $50,000. They can't do anything. And that's where we need the state to help. So with that, Dawn, I'll turn it back over to you. And for other people in the room that are live in the room, you might relay your questions to Dawn, because we're doing introductions to people in the room. It's hard to hear the ones that are further away from her computer.
Thank you, Roger. That's a lot of information to absorb. I wonder if I could ask you to remove or stop sharing your screen so we can see everyone.
Absolutely. Stop share. There we go.
Oh, wow. Look at everyone. Now we just see everybody's name. I wonder if we can see faces. I'd love to have a conversation around all of this. Our ideas were really just to share with you all the work that we've been doing, where we're kind of headed, And really between Roger's work and our work over the last, well, 12 to 18 months, we've had hundreds of people come out to have public conversations. Each of Roger's conversations, I think, at least had a minimum of about 50 people in them. And then we've held public town halls and engaged several hundred people that way. So I feel like we've shaken the branches up there pretty good, and that people are really engaged, very anxious to try to move communities forward. Showcasing the job opportunities as well. Our major employers, like everywhere, are struggling to find employees, and we're trying to do everything that we can. But as we continue to shift, that it's all about attracting people to place and what makes our communities magnetic, and how do we continue to attract people to rural areas. So we've got a several-legged stool that we're working on to work on housing, to work on marketing, to work on all these things. So Roger's work is just so well-timed for all of our efforts. But I really believe in our area, in just the rural area, we're probably looking at 750 to 1,000 people in the next 5 years. So when I started my career, it was all about creating jobs, and we work our butts off to try to make something happen. Now we did a good job apparently. and now I'm afraid we're going to start missing the opportunities in front of us and start degrading the economic boom that we have created because people can't be there.
And one thing, if you don't mind me interrupting you, is one thing is even places like Marvin Windows, all of these, and I'm just, because that one was so close to where we stayed in Grafton, is what happens for them to the quality of life is going to, what happens with, if they can't get employees, they're going to move. I mean, I heard that up in Pembina, I can't remember the bus company up there, that they're thinking about moving out of Pembina because they can't get workers. But your quality of life is exceptional. I've worked across Minnesota, and I've spent a lot of time in Western North Dakota, of course, we have a national park and great little towns like Medora, and we've worked in Williston and all of those. But you know what? This area of the state is amazing. I mean, what I saw in Nelson County, for instance, just blew me away. The terrain and everything. It's just there. But here's the other thing is even when it comes to tourism, we can bring people into the region. We can get them out on the lakes. We can get them out fishing, hunting, biking. We can get them out sightseeing, but we need to monetize it. That means we need to pull people into these little towns to their local little saloon or their local little restaurant. So this is even helping them at a grassroots level. So when we say come to this lake, and not a dam, a lake, when we come to this lake, you're going to find some of the best stand-up paddleboarding. But when you're there, make sure you go into the town of Larimore and eat at such and such a restaurant. You've got to monetize it. That's my big words. But our problem is we can work with these small businesses to improve their facades, to be open in better hours. We can do all of that, but then we need to get people to their door. The locals already know about them, but visitors don't. And that takes funding that the Red River Regional Council and the Rendezvous region doesn't have. And so we're trying to figure out how to do that.
I'm having trouble hearing you. Sorry.
So.
Sarah, do you want to?
Well, and part of that, I completely agree with that. So much of that does come down to that workforce challenge, right? It's a chicken egg. You need to have the longer hours to attract the people, but you need to have the workers to extend the hours. And yeah, and right now, that's obviously our biggest challenge. But certainly agree with the connections that you make to the lack of image from the state. It's I don't take that personal. We work our butts off every day trying to create an image for the state, but with the limited resources that we have, especially compared to our region
Yes.
is the best funded. The states around us, our competitive set, are some of the best funded states.
Yep.
In terms of tourism marketing in the country. So
Right.
that also puts us at a little bit of a disadvantage, but yeah, super interesting. Loved some of the innovative thoughts. some of the work that Katie and her team are working on, along with our marketing team, are connected directly to these. And so it was kind of, because nobody knows some of the work that we're doing, and some of it is exactly what you're recommending, especially in regards to the regional approach to attracting and connecting people to community for those long-term jobs, and elevating, our state website, which is undergoing a revamp and will be relaunched soon, the Find a Good Life in North Dakota site. But yeah, it's tying all the dots together, connecting all the dots together, and outdoor recreation we're working on. Pretty much everything you talked about, Roger, is exactly what we've all been working on. But it really is kind of nice for you to synthesize it down to this list and to break it down by who maybe it makes sense for. So yeah, just super interesting.
Well, and one thing, and I'm glad you brought up something, because I don't want anybody to say, well, Sarah's not doing a good job. And that's not the case. The problem is you're being outfunded by everybody around you as much as 10 times. I mean, it's not even close. So you don't really stand a chance. I think what you do is amazing. Like when I went to the website, and did you know, those little facts about North Dakota, I thought were really great. But it's just a matter of having enough power to do it. And I think it's important for people to realize that tourism is the front door to your non-tourism economic development. Your efforts can do more to recruit people, jobs, investment than any other Department of Commerce website. I mean, because quality of life, that's what you showcase. And so I think it's really important for state, particularly legislators, to understand the role that tourism, this is just not about getting visitors to come in. This is also about all the other things the state wants to accomplish.
This is Representative Munson. I was just going to mention to you, you were wondering where to find the jobs, and Job Service North Dakota is where you would go to find most of those 60,000 jobs, I guess, that the governor was talking about.
Okay, great.
And my little committee, we have the Commerce Department's budget, as well as within that budget is tourism. And
Yes.
It's a fight to get money for tourism through the legislature.
And yeah, and that's a problem I noticed a lot. And I think, the state is very fiscally conservative. And having worked in 45 of the 50 states, and I think that sometimes we need to invest in the future a little more rather than just put out fires. And I know that, and that's because people see tourism as one stool. They see tourism as just getting outsiders to come in and spend money and, drive on our streets and fish out our lakes and all that. So yes, that's what it's hard to educate the public that tourism is actually more than that. But thank you for your efforts. And I'm glad to know about Job Service North Dakota. So, and I'll check that out.
I think Cody has a question, and I'd like to ask one as well.
Thanks, Sean. Roger, appreciate the insight. It's always good to get a neutral outside view. We live this every day, so thanks for your info. As it relates to the action plan, I think everybody on here can tell you, my boss loves the generational moonshot kind of projects, but given what you've told us, I mean, is there some, I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit, or incrementalism isn't necessarily the enemy? What would you attack first? And I know from a parks perspective, our intent and our hope is to do some significant investments in the Pembina Gorge area and our properties and parks there. But is there a way to shrink geographically, do betas in smaller areas, or what would your approach be from that perspective?
Well, number one, I'm a big proponent of concessionaire agreements at state parks and even at national parks. And I've been part of the National Park Foundation for quite a while, but it's, I know, for instance, I'll pick on Mike. Icelandic State Park, I think is really, I haven't been to every state park in North Dakota, but I would consider that a crown jewel. I'm probably going to hear from his counterpart in, Turtle Creek now, but, but, and I think the park tries, I think you have a concessionaire that rents out bikes, if I remember right. And I think that's good. I think there's some kayaks and stand-up paddle boards, and I'm not sure if the park actually rent those out, but I believe in creating concessionaire agreements that would create a small business opportunity where they rent out cross-country skis in the winter, and then they rent out stand-up paddle boards in the summer. So I'm a big proponent of concessionaire agreements. Number one, because it creates job opportunities. It takes a little less pressure off the park itself and park staff. But the other thing, when it comes down to the Pembina Gorge, which I think is probably the greatest asset, in this region there, but you've got Frostfire, which is private, and they need a master development plan. But then you've got the Pembina Gorge, but then you also have a golf course. I thought, man, could we somehow group these together as one attraction where you do summer theater over at Frostfire, where they cross. And I even thought, could we concessionaire out that state park to a private entity that would run Frostfire, maybe, and the golf course, I don't know where they stand, who owns them, but I just thought that whole little area should be under one umbrella. Whether you say, well, as a state park, I mean, there didn't really seem to be any buildings or anything there to really house park staff. I thought, so maybe that whole thing would be concessionaired out, to somebody that could kind of combine Frostfire and Pembina Gorge and maybe the golf course working with the town of Walhalla, and so sometimes those might make more sense. That was the one park entity when I was there that I was most disappointed in, because the trails weren't well marked. There was no staffing there. It was just, and that was before you were there, by the way, Cody. And
we've got challenges there. Our opportunities.
Yeah, and so it was the one that was challenged because it really doesn't have staffing or anything. And that's what I thought, maybe we could concession. If somebody gave you a great proposal, the state would still own it. The state would still benefit in it, like a profit sharing or so there's still something in it for the state. You're not giving up any public lands, still be public access. We wouldn't charge any more than the state would charge to go into any other state park, so there might be some things like that. I think your state park system is really great. And I was surprised by the ones I saw in this region, how well they were. I mean, some of the buildings down Turtle Creek with the logs and everything are better than anything I've seen in Yellowstone National Park. So you have some really great assets that I think are part of the mix, and they're part of quality of life.
Thank you.
And by the way, state parks is usually next to tourism, is usually one of the first on the chopping block. And it just drives me crazy in states that they start chopping the things that draw people there, which is your recreational assets, your state parks, your local parks, your arts and culture, So, and I understand about streets and sewers and, all those other highways and everything else. I get it. But I sure hate seeing people cut where you're affecting quality of life directly.
I'd like to just say, my appreciation to Dawn and her board for funding this project, and you, Roger, for bringing it to us today, because there's certainly a lot of parallels between what you're saying and the Main Street initiative that I get to work on here at the Department of Commerce. But I wanted to say thank you for endorsing the Accelerate North Dakota housing program. I liked your comments about the homesteading side. I think that program could specifically be used to accelerate that kind of an idea or thought process. My question is, I've been exposed more and more to land banks, and I don't know what your exposure is, but 24 other states have land banks. They can create them at the city, county, or state level. Have you worked with them, and wouldn't the land bank help to accelerate that type of program even faster?
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up. This is, a lot of times I call them redevelopment authorities, because that's the bottom line. You're trying to redevelop properties. We're not trying to take anything from anybody. We're trying to redevelop them. And so I always say, call them redevelopment authorities. And yes, that's what you're doing. And granted, these properties are coming into public ownership, but priority number one is to flip them to get them back on the tax rolls. Even in Iowa, we worked in many communities where and you're right, the cities can be involved, the towns can be involved, the counties can be involved. And I've seen it. I was working in one small town in Iowa, and this town actually took this big old building, revitalized it with the state part of the land bank program. Then they found a gal that went to Notre Dame. She went into retail management. She wanted to move back home. So she took this building and turned it into this fantastic mercantile. And then they sold it to her on a contract because she was new at it. But once again, they sold it to her at market value. You can't, you know what I mean? You can give them incentives to get going and everything, but you can't undercut, anybody. And she has people driving 50 to 75 miles just to go to her shop, and it totally changed their whole town. And so land banking, it is tremendous. It's just a way, and that's why I call it redevelopment. Sometimes people think we're taking empty land and then selling it or giving it away or whatever we're doing but I think a lot of this is redevelopment. It's taking existing properties that no longer are permittable. They're no longer, you can't live in them. You can't work in them. They do not fit code. And so, and rather than force the hand, I think a lot of this could be done. I think a lot of these places, they're abandoned. And I think a lot of these might have 10 years of tax debt stacked up and everything. I mean, I think a lot of this can be done. And that's why I don't want people to get hung up on the words eminent domain with a program like Accelerate North Dakota. And I think land banking is absolutely fantastic. And by the way, each time you flip one of these, you're making a little bit of money. You know what that does? That helps you accelerate the program. And it also would allow you enough funding to start buying lands for recreational purpose, which the state is very, very short of.
One quick follow-up. I'm glad to hear you have that level of exposure. We don't have enabling legislation on land banks in North Dakota. So I'm working on a potential proposal for that. Do you have a best practice state that you think we could follow?
I'm trying to think right off. I haven't dug into all 24 of those. I think if I remember right, Nevada has one, and I believe that Utah might have, and I know that Arizona has one, and I happen to live in Arizona. And what Arizona is doing with a lot of its land banking is it sells it, and then the money goes into public education. So right now, the governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey, has said, when we sell properties, we're dedicating that money to the state's school system, because remember, that was one of the top priorities of those millennials. So a lot of times it's, where does that money go? But I believe in the redevelopment model, which we did a lot in New Hampshire and we did a lot in Nevada. And I love redevelopment commissions, and I think that's what that falls under.
Thank you.
But I think you could create one. I have not seen one that did homesteading like I laid out here. And the reason I like this homesteading idea, which I don't know if anybody outside of Alaska has done it, and Alaska is another one of those states, is the fact that all right, now I forgot what I was going to say. Senior moment. But I think it's so important that that this money be reinvested and into more properties and land banking. So anyway, it'll come to me and I'll catch up with you again.
This is Dave Munson again, and I guess what you're describing here with your homesteading program is pretty interesting to me. We've done something for the larger cities, mostly the Renaissance zones.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is kind of a rural Renaissance zone, maybe, and I really like a lot of what I heard there.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that. That just reminded me of what I was going to say. Is with the homesteading, my problem with Tulsa and Topeka and all these cities, they're throwing money at a problem. And I think throwing $15,000 to somebody to work there for 2 years and then work remotely. Granted, the money's coming in from another state. They're working remotely. I think it's good. But the reason I like homesteading is because you're actually creating construction jobs. You're actually creating homes, which gives people more of a permanent base rather than in 2 years. If I decide I don't like Tulsa, I can leave. You know, and granted, they're going to get their money because people are going to spend more than the 15,000 there. You know, they're going to buy groceries, they're going to buy gas, they're going to buy cars. So I understand there's a return investment. I think this is a better return on investment and a great way to get rid of dilapidated properties, converting them into opportunities. Even for people, when I was staying in Listicle Park in Grafton, there was all these people coming from around the country for sugar beet harvest. And they were coming there, working the harvest, and then leaving and going back to Idaho and New Jersey and everywhere else they were from. And I would ask them, would you live here? And they go, sure. Good luck finding a house anywhere around here. You see what I mean? Yet there's tons of properties. They just have to be redeveloped. It doesn't always have to be an empty site that nobody ever lived on before. And I think this would be a fantastic program that creates jobs and creates incentive for people to live there. I
Katie,
think
I
this
would
is
be
a
really curious about your perspectives as it relates to the work that you're doing also with workforce development.
Sure. Well, yeah, like Sarah said before, I see a ton of alignment with this work, and I think it does help to inform the work that we're doing with the Find the Good Life campaign and our work with a company called Roll Call. But I mean, really to echo what she said, we've got some discretionary funds invested in that now, but I mean, states all over the country are investing a lot more heavily in workforce. And in order to make that initiative successful, we need sustained financial support, but it also has to be connected with everything else that's going on in the workforce system related to retention and skill development and breaking down some of the barriers that exist. And so the talent attraction side, though, piece is huge and front and center for us because we just simply don't have enough people. And really liked the ideas that you presented, and definitely see connection in you know, how do we do a better job of promoting the amenities that we have in North Dakota that make it a great place to live, because you're right, people can work from anywhere now. We've got to really be selling what we have to offer in terms of quality of life, and I think that there's a lot here.
There really is. And I didn't get into all the training workforce development because I think you as a state do a really good job with that. But even if we want to move to North Dakota and want to be in one of the rural areas, good luck finding a place to live, because most of these places that we're talking about land banking or revitalizing, they're not listed for sale. You'd have a hard time even figuring out who owns them. You can go to county records and stuff. And that's why I like this. And if you incentivize people so they can get the training there and they might get the job there, but now you're saying, we'll even give you the property where you can build a nice home and be part of a community from the grassroots up. I think it would be exceptional. And by the way, you're not building a home for them. You'll work with private sector on financing and everything, traditional mortgage. So you're creating more jobs in the mortgage industry, the banking industry, in the construction industry, in the retail trades. I mean, you know, but I got to say that outside of Grand Forks in these 4 counties, I think I saw maybe, and remember, I drove 2,000 miles through these. I think I saw outside of Grand Forks proper and maybe outside of Thompson, which is right next door, I maybe saw 10 buildings under renovation or remodeling. I didn't see any houses. See what I mean? We're not even, I mean, we have all these jobs, and even if you can get the workers, where are they going to live? Because we have a very limited inventory of places and no building opportunities. Most of these little towns that are dying are built out, and those properties aren't for sale. I mean, that, you know, that's the other thing is housing, and it doesn't have to be low in. We're not talking low income. We're talking about single family homes. But I've also seen schools like in St. Thomas that I think that one, they now come down to Grafton. But I think that there was a big school there that could be converted into maybe some parks. Maybe there's a private sector possibility there if it was land banked and then given out for starting homes, apartment homes, condominium homes. But that's why I love the homesteading. It also creates an incentive, and you're giving, and you've got property for them. Most of these towns, by the way, one thing, most of these little towns, even the ones where I showed all those dilapidated homes, are beautiful towns. I always said, people always think of North Dakota as there's no trees in North Dakota. And I keep going, you're in the wrong state, go to Nevada, or Iowa or somewhere. But they are, almost every single community has lots of street trees. Almost everyone has a little playground. These are great places. People would love to live in them if they had the opportunity to build something there.
I'd like to call on Mayor Hinkle just for some perspective. She's the mayor of Cavalier. Then I noticed James joined us. I didn't see you earlier, so welcome, James.
I would say housing is our biggest hurdle. Hello again. And we are trying to develop our incentives a little better to draw people in. The problem that we are running into, we have a lot of those dilapidated homes or buildings. We have an incentive, a demolition incentive. I think something about North Dakotans is there's a lot of pride, and people don't like to give up their property, even if it is run down and there's nothing left. We have one building on Main Street that should be condemned, and it's full of this family's treasures, essentially. They will not demolish it. We've got a couple of them actually. I can think of two on Main Street, and they won't take advantage of our incentive program. They won't demolish it. They just are clinging on to these treasures. And I feel like that there's a lot of that, even with homes. They may not even be living in them anymore. They're just sitting empty. There's nothing, but they're paying the taxes. They know they own them. They have them, and they just don't want to let go of them. But our other hurdle is we don't own any city land to develop housing. And so the landowners where we would like to utilize, we would like to grow, it's not affordable. And so when you try and pencil it out on paper, like, to start something, it's upside down.
Yeah. And I understand your pain. And by the way, a shout out, I got to say that out of the 42 communities outside of Grand Forks, I thought that Cavalier was, it was the one community that I really saw as being proactive. You know what I mean? And thanks to you and leadership at the, but even there, you even struggle with, I know your incentive program, getting the rest of the council, because people are we need to fix streets. Everything's so reactive. And those are challenges in downtowns. I mean, and I don't expect you to go and play a heavy hand, but you got to make sure these buildings are up to code. You can have fire departments should be doing inspections of them. And if they're not up to code, and it creates a public safety risk. We've even worked in towns where they say, we have a piece of property over here that you could put your family, we'll trade you. We'll do a flat out trade. We'll give you this home over here. We'll buy it and we'll trade you. And then you take the one downtown and then flip it over to somebody that will redevelop. So we've even done crazy things like that. And that's where if you had a state or county or region redevelopment authority, that's the kind of things they do. And I've actually done that in my past where I'll go to them and say, I know you want to keep your family treasures here. You don't have any place where you live. What if we were to find a better situation for you that wouldn't be in the middle of our downtown? We will give you that. We will trade you properties. Now that means you have to buy a piece of property, give it to them, and then get the title of this one, and then put it out there for redevelopment. So sometimes you have to do things a little bit crazy. Sometimes we'll get somebody that's a commercial real estate agent to kind of step in and volunteer their time to make this exchange. It's always tough as a mayor or as elected official to start getting into property purchases and things like that. So sometimes we'll work with the private sector. That's why I'd love to see the state have a redevelopment authority or the land banking so that you can do those kinds of trades.
I will say with something like that, it's hard for a city to do something like that because the minute that a city
Very.
buys property, you take it off the tax roll, and that's when our residents start screaming. I mean, we have people out there that will say, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that. And I understand that. I mean,
Sure.
if you can keep it under a private organization, then that's way better.
Yeah, it would be. And that's why I like redevelopment authorities at a state level or a region level or a county level. I mean, that's what port districts around the country do. But in your case, yes, that makes it very, very difficult. But one thing to remember is that you may be putting that into public ownership, but the whole idea is to get it back on the tax rolls. All
Right.
you're going to do, because once it comes under public ownership, you can get grants to remove asbestos or lead or any other things. You can flip it using some grant funds or low interest loans that a private sector couldn't.
Right.
And so then what you do is you're selling it and there's a gain back to the city to put back into quality of life issues.
Mhm.
As far as property for building houses and stuff, that is a big issue. That's why I say, and Cavalier, I didn't see that many dilapidated homes. I mean, none of those pictures I showed that everybody knows were in Cavalier, but in many of the other communities. And that's why I like redevelopment, where you're taking something that already exists rather than trying to go buy a new plot of land. And that brings up the challenge is, do we take something out of agriculture to put it into residential? And is that counterintuitive to what we are as a state and what our local economy is? And that's where you get into some bigger concerns. And that's always a challenge. But I'm all about taking older, dilapidated homes, flipping them, remodeling them, doing things like that where you can. But yeah, that is a challenge. And in Cavalier, your area has probably has most of the best tourism assets. If you take Icelandic and the museum at the park and across the highway and everything, what you have there is amazing. The golf course, the trails. You're one of the towns that actually has a trail system, which is really a great asset. So if we wanted to move to Cavalier, there comes our challenge. Where do we live?
Right. Yep. I hear you.
Yeah. And that's something I'm looking at that, trying to figure out, well, what is the answer? How do you do that? So
I did visit with Sean Kessel this last summer, and he had what I thought was a really good plan. It's very similar to what you're talking about with the land bank and, buying up some of those dilapidated houses and then, selling them to a contractor for, I think he had like $1, and then they
Right.
eventually make the money off of it themselves.
Well, and even in downtowns, I have to say that in these 42 communities, there was probably 15 of them where their downtowns are non-existent. They still have buildings there. And those downtowns, I got to tell you, they're not going to come back. There's just not the population. We looked at people's surveys and said, we want a grocery store and your population is 50. Well, it's not going to happen. So in those cases, in those downtowns, so not necessarily in Cavalier, even downtown commercial buildings could be live workspace. So we don't want to get stuck in zoning where, well, this has to be commercial first floor retail. Now in downtown Cavalier, I would like that to be retail, restaurant, pretty much what you have in your downtown. But in a lot of the other towns, even the downtowns could be live workspace for people. Or you take out, there's a couple of downtowns say just eliminate that and then put residential there, just make it a residential community. And so there's some things you do there. For you, it is a little more challenging because of all the land surrounding you and their uses.
For the group's knowledge here too, that there's a few people in this group that are serving on what we're calling a North Dakota Rural Housing Development Task Force. And our goal in that is to really dig into the barriers to housing, because housing is the strongest need, and yet there's very little development. And I think it's the core of that is an economics issue. And we've had multiple meetings at this point and honing in on a slate of policy and program recommendations that will help move the needle in rural communities.
Yeah.
So-
And I think that it's going to be hard outside of the urban areas to go get residential subdivisions started. This
Mhm.
is about taking what is old and making it new again. And I gotta say in these 4 counties, and I'm not even talking about the unincorporated towns. We're just talking about the incorporated towns, but I could probably count 700 or 800 places that should be redeveloped. That's a lot of houses and a lot of people.
One of the main goals of the Accelerate North Dakota Housing program, as it's presented, is to take advantage of existing infrastructure and existing places. So the only thing that wasn't in that program that I've heard you talk about today is that homesteading part. And it was all about getting it to bare ground and then getting a structure built on it. But the concept as originally presented was to have a builder or a developer do that. Your concept is a slight tweak on that, where it's no, find a private sector person who wants to come and give them the land for free. So I think that's an easy modification to that program, and that's been presented to the task force that Don mentioned. And I think that and the HIF program are the two things that are coming out big time. And
You know, I think what it relates to that though, Sean and Roger, is I use Jake as a sounding board because he is the type of person that is our market. And so even attracting a Jake from Wisconsin, where do you land first? You can't take on a construction project to be able to relocate. So that's where I think it's maybe a mix of private developers and private folks too.
Yes, but there's one thing that's really interesting is we purchased a piece of property up near Spokane, Washington. So up in that area. And then I started looking into building it ourselves. And you know what I found is doing research that the whole build it yourself thing is huge with millennials. So what happens now, there are builders now that build kit homes. They send you a package, it comes on a truck, and then you build it yourself. Now you might contract out for your foundation. There's a job. You might contract out for electrical. You might charge out for plumbing, but there are modular homes. They come with these, what they call structural integrated panels, SIPs, but you're going to see a lot of that. And yes, but if Jake, and Jake's a great sounding, he was my sounding board too. Is that if I wanted to build a home, number one, where would I find a piece of property? Even if I wanted to build one, where can I find a piece of property in Grafton that doesn't have something on it that I have to tear down or something? And then he says, okay, now I want to build my own, or I would like to work with a local builder. Now we just created another job for a local builder. And there are even companies out there that say, we will help you build your house. You tell us what you want to do on it, and we'll help you do the other elements. And then banks work with them because you actually have a builder involved for a construction loan. So I think there's remedies to all of those. But the last thing I want is mobile homes. We want stick-built homes or modular homes on these sites because they're more permanent and they're part of community building.
Hey, Sean, Cody here. Maybe we can talk offline too. I mean, from what I'm hearing from Roger and what you're talking about, Sean, I think a lot of the processes and programs we implemented post 2011 flood up in Minot, both on the kind of the land bank concept and those kind of things are almost a perfect carbon copy. And, you know, maybe even the mechanisms for funding could work there too. So let's connect.
absolutely, yeah. Minot's one of the two cities that actually has a land trust in North Dakota. Grand Forks is the other one. So two communities very affected by flooding.
That's DES seeded that all the funding for that land trust came through when I was at DES. So myself and some of the old team are still have that in the memory bank, I'm sure.
Awesome, absolutely. I'll make sure I get a hold of you.
Yeah, and a lot of this was meant for the commercial areas, you know, like downtown Minot, like downtown, you know, Grand Forks and stuff. But just remember, this same kind of process can work for residential areas or dilapidated downtowns where they're not really going to come back, but be a great little community to live in and redeveloping those. So it can work on that side too. And as a matter of fact, it did work that way. I know in Grand Forks, people complained that a lot of those affordable housing went away in the flood and they didn't get them back. So I know it can work that way, but yeah, same type of concept.
So James, I feel like your wheels are spinning. Am I reading you right? Like lots to.
Well, yeah, workforce is obviously our biggest constraint to economic growth right now in the state. And everything is a chain reaction and has a dependency. And the critical dependency, I think, fundamentally always starts with communities and places where people want to live, whether that's taking a virtual job with them to our state or moving to a location for a job opportunity, right? Which seems to be a thing of the past, I'm learning very quickly. And so every economic development, workforce development, or even, branding challenge that we have as a state fundamentally depends on places where people want to live and recreate and enjoy. And if you don't have housing, I mean, this is a very difficult situation for us. And what I mean by that is I can't get a group of developers to go up to Cavalier, because just like when I was a small town administrator in Ada, and I was like, hey, you can get 12 to 15% returns on your investment if you build in this subdivision. They'd look at me and say, yeah, except I get 22 to 24% down in Fargo. So the people that are looking at maybe if Cavalier had an opportunity or are looking at Grand Forks and seeing that higher value proposition for them or higher margin. So we've got a slate of probably 12 to 18 recommendations, if not more now, Sean. I think it might even be up to 2 or 3 dozen that we've made and we will continue to make to our boss. But most importantly, the legislature is going to have to come with us on some sort of journey. And it's not a guaranteed journey. We can't take things that have worked in the past, conventional sort of concepts that have worked in rural America in the past, and apply them to now or the future. And the reason why I say that is we live in a completely different dimension than we did 2, 3, 4 years ago. Yep. And we have a major opportunity. And I had our all staff meeting today. We have a weekly sort of huddle for like a half hour, and it was night and day difference between myself and my peer commerce or the Minnesota Deed Commissioner in Fargo last week when we spoke at the Midwest Economic Forum and Outlook Forum. And the reason why is he's talking about a demographic decline. He's talking about various programs, and at no point, really nice guy, did we talk about economic development, workforce development. I don't know what they were talking about except decline. And we have the opposite issue, except that growth is concentrated to the I-29 corridor or the far western part of the state, and everything in between is a hustle and it's a grind, and it's how do we get this, how do we get that. And so first of all, Roger, I've never met you before, but I appreciate your level of passion that I can read right through this computer screen from wherever you're calling from. It's obviously sunny and probably warmer than where we are right now. Are you in an RV by chance? Is that like one of those cool RVs?
I am. I'm one of those digital nomads, and I'm in Oklahoma City where it's about 45 degrees and about 40-mile-an-hour winds.
Okay, well maybe I misread the sunshine for nice weather. But nice to meet you, and I appreciate the passion for our state that carries 850, 900 miles to your north right now, and we've got to figure out a way to have our legislature, and I'm not just saying this because our E&E, meaning basically my subcommittee chairman for appropriations is on this, but I mean it like the legislature and communities have to be equally as pumped about these things. And that's where we have to get them, if they're going to fund things, vice reluctantly saying, oh, yeah, fine, here's 2 million for this, 8 million for that. Right. We'll sprinkle this. We can't do a peanut butter approach. We've got to do something that's going to work. We can't take conventional wisdom because it's not working anymore. And we've got to figure out how to crack this nut. And listening, and nice to meet you, Mayor of Cavalier, Lacey. Very nice to meet you. Yeah, I just went on their website, and unless they stole the picture, they've got a bike share up there, which is really cool.
We do.
Cavalier is one of the towns that had a really good website. Take a look at some of the other ones.
And we're actually, like, within the next month, we're getting an even better website, a revamped website, so it'll be improved.
Very nice. Sure that Commerce put money into that bike share a couple of years ago, didn't we, Lacey?
Yes, we utilized the vibrancy, I think it was. Yep, and awesome. We share it with Icelandic State Park, so the bikes out of Icelandic and Cavalier can be utilized at either place.
Sweet. Well, if there's a way we can capture that kind of momentum And even if it's only a tenth of communities across the state, and you are seeing it in other places like Watford City. I mean, there are communities that are equally, if you know, equally as passionate about amenities, growth, development, et cetera. Especially those that are co-located to, you know, where Cody manages, you know, where people recreate. But if we can just figure out that path forward, I think we'd be in an amazing spot. And that's what I think we need help with, because it's one thing to get up there. The legislature probably gets tired of seeing my face because 9-10 times in a 2-month period, I'll do the House, then the Senate. And all I'm doing is asking and asking and asking. But instead of asking, if I can look at them and say, this is what you're investing in, and this is what you get, versus, and that's what I need. I need communities, mayors, and these success stories to come with us on this journey and continue helping us find those unconventional mechanisms. I also went on Zillow, and there's like 2 houses for sale. They're nice, the 2 that are on the market right now in Cavalier. But, you know, is that going to make, am I going to get a digital, wouldn't be a nomad, but a virtual worker to want to move there because they can get a $130,000 house? 10 years ago, that was the conventional wisdom.
Right.
But so that's what we have to figure out. And that's the challenge of our day.
Well,
here.
and I really think with this, I keep using the word accelerate North Dakota, but maybe that program needs to be, remember I said marketing. Remember, you know, I did those in a priority. Did you notice how I did it? Let's get more money in tourism so people think better in North Dakota. Let's put more money so these communities can put a better face out there with their websites, with photography, YouTube, those kinds of things to promote their assets. And then we do all the marketing. Then we start working in the communities with their little restaurants and retail shops so they can attract more than just locals. Then we start to bring people there. And then when they want to stay there, then we need to be able to have more than 2 houses available, or in many of these towns, where we need to get rid of. This is where the Accelerate program really comes in, where we start to create new housing opportunities on existing land. You know, one thing millennials want is they want to see positive change. And when you walk into a town and, you know, 2 out of 5 houses are dilapidated and empty, you know what? They're going to cross that town off the list really quick. And it could be really a cute town. If we could just get rid of those. So this accelerate, what I'm talking about here is not, well, let's give Sarah some more money, let's throw more money here. It's about putting together a holistic program that starts with, how do we change our image so that we're a desirable place people want to go? Then number 2, how do we promote those assets? And then number 3, when they get there, will we deliver on the promise? And then when they say, I would like to live here, we give them that opportunity and incentives. And that's what these 5 recommendations I made are really kind of one. I'm not sure how you write this into a bill, you know, or how you would do this, but somehow they need to be kind of grouped together. And I know a lot of people in this meeting are already working on, they all kind of meld together.
Absolutely.
But I just thought if Region 4 could be a pilot program, and you start, and the reason I like regional councils, because in the state, you have the opportunity to create 8 programs, not 53 county programs or 400 and some odd city and town programs. But I really believe that maybe this is a pilot program where we go through these steps. And then when the legislature sees that this can work and give it some funding, because I'm really concerned about giving Dawn a plan that she has no way she can implement it when she already has a hard time just getting money to survive as a regional council. And so, you know, and that's why I try to see this as a holistic program that will increase the population, increase visitor spending, you know, and that will improve your schools and create more jobs. I mean, you know what? Where people live, visitors go. And so do accountants and grocery stores and everything else. So it's all about how many people you can attract to live in the state and into these communities that all have really good potential.
Yeah, and Roger, I think our issue is you know, the argument dies when we take it from an aggregated perspective, because
Right.
you have the largest or fastest growing city, fastest growing county, third fastest growing city. Then you have the previous 10 years from 2000 to 2010, we were the fastest growing state. Now we're the fourth growth. So growth isn't a challenge for us. It's just we're leaving a majority of the state behind, and that's the part. So it's got to be very well curated, data driven, and targeted. And the other thing is each region has its own culture, has its own unique needs, its own unique. So it's tough, to cookie cutter that. However, I think it's an awesome challenge to have. And the problem is where probably 60 to 65% of the state lives at this point. They're going to want the resources, but they don't have the problem attracting people, right?
Yeah,
Like
and that's
your
why,
Willistons and
right. And that's why I think, if you did legislation, this pilot program would be for communities of, say, less than 15,000 or less than 10,000 or whatever, because that is probably 90% of the communities in the state are in that category. I mean, if you look at a list of the cities in North Dakota, by the time you get down to, Williston or Dickinson, all of a sudden we drop down to less than 20,000 people. And that's the other 400 and some cities and towns. And so,
Well, Grafton
yeah,
as Grafton is 4,200, and I think we're 13th or 15th largest community in the state. So I'm curious if Julie Rigg or Emily O'Brien or Meredith, if she's still on the line, just from some Grand Forks perspective, we spent a whole lot of time talking about rural. I'm curious if you have anything you'd like to share from your vantage point.
Hi, wasn't sure who was going to speak up first. Of course, we've been involved with this since the beginning with Roger, and we've really enjoyed it. And Roger, I have to tell you, some of the suggestions that you gave us already are already being implemented up here. So good things happening, of course. So much of this that we're talking about, of course, is not necessarily my marching orders, which of course being the Convention and Visitors Bureau, being strictly visitors, but we work very closely with our local economic development corporation for Grand Forks in the region. And they have been working on an amazing workforce program, definitely leading the state with their workforce development program that they're doing. So we've got some meetings coming up to discuss how we can more partner, because there is so much crossover. So I'm definitely, I emailed Don to see if they were invited today, which they were, but they couldn't be here. So definitely going to be taking some of this to discuss with them. And when you talk about the regions and putting them together, one of the conversations we've had with Don is Grand Forks Rural County becoming part of the Rendezvous region. But there would definitely be some overlap there because they're already under the umbrella of our Economic Development Corporation that's already doing a pretty outstanding job when it comes to workforce development. So do you have any suggestions on how those two can work? I don't think they're looking for somebody to take over their program because they're doing an amazing job. But how maybe they work better together in parallel almost.
Yeah. And that's, when I read back through the surveys, we did that online questionnaire, and it was interesting that every single person in Grand Forks County that was not in Grand Forks, when we said, where do you take people, all said Grand Forks. I mean, that's where they go. When we did that list of what millennials want, Grand Forks had all 10 of them, but a lot of other communities would have all 10 of them if they, but nobody would know about them. But as far as I think, but I got to say that some of the roughest, and I hate to say that word, the roughest communities we saw were actually in Grand Forks County. I mean, I think I think Pembina County had the least amount of towns that were pretty much could be erased, it's start over. But you did have some of those out there, and I know they fall under those umbrellas, but that's why I was trying to do this. Is there a way to do it at statewide?
Well,
I think.
And that's where it's a little bit different too, because economic development is, it's definitely more of a campaign, more of a workforce development campaign, as opposed to some of the infrastructure things you're talking about.
Right.
So they're certainly not going to give up, not stop doing that brand. And they're
Right.
working very hard to promote the whole county. But yes, you're absolutely right. Even when we were doing the homework assignments, trying to get information on some of those towns that you were asking for was incredibly difficult. Don was working on it. I was working on it. Stacy was working on it. We had people at EDC working on it. And you're absolutely right. It was very difficult. But that's, with so many people are trying to do such great things for this region. It's just how do we work together and not complicate it too much so we're able to do the marketing part of it as well as the development part of it.
Yeah. And then when it came to the Rendezvous region, and Julie, I apologize because I kind of pushed Grand Forks out of the way because I think the challenges are not in Grand Forks, they're in the other 41. And maybe not Thompson, some of yours that are more bedroom communities, but I really felt like, I can't see you promoting the Rendezvous region because Grand Forks is a destination unto itself. And your job is Grand Forks. And granted, I know you go over to East Grand Forks and they want you to be West Grand Forks. I mean, I've heard all of that, but really you're a standalone destination, but the rest of this region isn't. So, and if we said, well, come to the Rendezvous region, which is Grand Forks and everyone else, I don't know how that doesn't push people to Cavalier. And I wouldn't expect you to do that. I think the Rendezvous region, for all the people you bring into the Grand Forks area, I think it'd be cool if Rendezvous region says, while you're visiting Grand Forks, take a day trip out to Stump Lake or out to one of these little towns where there's something cool to see. And they need to help you on that because your mission is Grand Forks. And I totally see that. So I don't know. So I wouldn't see that you would change your marketing to the Rendezvous region. I think the Rendezvous region is everyone else that's outside of Grand Forks, in that northeast corner. And they got quite a bit, and I'm still trying to figure out who is the market. The Rendezvous region for day trips might be Grand Forks. Maybe it's Fargo for overnight trips. I don't know. The Rendezvous region has enough assets to pull people from Minneapolis. I mean, considering everything there's between Minneapolis and you, what are they going to get that they can't already get closer to home? See, those are some of the challenges. And so we
Winnipeg.
still have to work on that. But I don't see, I really see the Rendezvous region as being the rural areas in Northeast North Dakota. But I don't even know how we educate the locals that the Rendezvous region even exists. Let alone learning how to spell rendezvous when they're on a web search. So those are, so those are kind of some of the little challenges, and how you integrate those. I think that Julie, you could probably do teasers into, did you realize that, once you're in Grand Forks, we got some great little things we can do in the area. I don't know that you're going to send 2.5 hours away, but I really think this is about promoting those little cool things that you have that are out in the rural areas.
Emily O'Brien, did you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, so I've always loved the pieces that Julie has done here in Grand Forks. And I think one of the biggest things that really has an impact is having familiar faces in their marketing pieces.
Yes.
In the brochures that you get or the pieces that you see at the grocery store is recognizable, familiar faces. And it's a wide age group. It's young kids to college kids to middle-aged women that are out shopping to just everyone across the board. And then with the legislative piece, the hardest thing is the education piece to legislators, and especially coming up this coming up election cycle with 101 seats up for grabs, it's going to be even more of a harder obstacle to educate new legislators and old legislators, or I shouldn't say old, but returning legislators that are coming back and, selling those rural areas and why we need more funding in commerce. And that, like Representative Munson said, it's the whole legislative body. His committee, I would say, probably gets it, but it's the entire legislative body between the House and the Senate and having those conversations with every single legislator possible and, explaining the ROI, getting legislators to come and visit and experience these areas and selling it to them and getting them to understand. Being a citizen-run legislature, we don't have staff or interns or anyone else answering our calls or emails. You're looking at the intern, you're looking at the staff, it's me, myself, and I, and we do the best we can to get everywhere we possibly can, but having, creative, outside of the bubble marketing ideas that, it sounds great when you're in your office and with your team and you guys are used to, hey, we go out to the Pembina Gorge all the time and we can experience those things, but to someone that is outside of the bubble,
Right.
how do you get them involved? How do you, loop them in? Where do you find that the common interest with those people? And then one other little thing with the legislative side of things is, what is the ROI? What is the state's return on investment for what they're doing? And I think that's probably one of the number one questions is, yep, everything sounds great. Your binder is beautiful, but what's the ROI back to the state?
And that would always be tax base. I mean, that's what, if you want to improve quality of life for your citizens, you have to, I always say every elected official's number one priority is quality of life. I mean, that's why they're elected, to improve the quality of life for their citizens under their watch, under their care. And so that's what this is really about. But I think probably the easiest way to sell someone, we're right now, I'm in the middle of writing this plan. And it's going to be a plan that the Red River Regional Council has not enough money or no money to really implement. Maybe the state comes in, and I don't know what pot, if that's under commerce, that's where I would guess, would say, well, let's try this as a pilot program. Let's see how it works. Let's give this funding for 3 years, 36 months, and see if we could do this. Maybe it's under that Accelerate North Dakota, and we expand the program a little bit so it has more on the front end and more on the, and maybe when that didn't pass, maybe it's because, well, we were going to get rid of all these properties, but if we turn those into homesteading and new home ownership opportunities, maybe that would help close the sale. So they see where the marketing fits in, where the education fits in, where the redevelopment fits in, and the result is new businesses coming in because we have a workforce and we have new housing and we have new construction and, and that's all new tax base.
I'm
So,
really
but you're right,
curious
that's always the
about
tough thing.
I'm curious for the legislative feedback on, I think we're shifting gears from ROI to opportunity cost. I really use the recent announcement of Marvin expanding to Fargo rather than Grafton. Because this is the chipping away at our economic base, is if we can't meet these needs or seize the opportunities, they go away, right? So I almost think it's opportunity cost more than ROI at this point. I really feel our region is at risk of starting to lose a lot of this. It's a threat at this point that we can't meet these needs. We're
Well,
going to lose them.
Out of the 42 communities, I just pulled up Esri's demographics for all these counties and even other counties across state. You're losing population to the urban areas, because there's more amenities, there's more activity, there's more for them there. And what's sad is we're in a time now where people want rural, but they're not moving to your rural areas. I mean, out of those 42 communities, I think 38 of them are losing population. Part of the problem is I think you're a very fiscally conservative state. And when I sit there and look at all these states, and I've testified before many state legislatures, I don't see a lot of proactive investment in the future. It seems, and this is just me personally in looking at things, that, well, we need to fix this, or we need to do this or this. And I don't see anybody. And that's why I said, if we put together a proactive plan like this and gave it a shot, I think you'd see, wow, we could implement this elsewhere in the state. But yeah, Marvin moving to, you know, Fargo is a perfect example, or other companies that are in the area just saying, well, we don't have the workforce here, so we're going to move somewhere else where the workforce wants to be.
I want to do a quick plug too to Commerce, because we use the Partners in Planning program to help fund this program as well. So I wanted to make sure that was known. We appreciate that.
Yeah. And I always think departments of commerce should, departments of commerce is always about the future, not fixing the present or the past. The Department of Commerce is about tax base. And so I always think that should be, if there was one department that's about how do we grow our rural communities, if that's a focus for the state, then this is a program that could do that. But it's also going to take state participation.
Senator Heckman would like to chime in here.
Yeah, thanks for all the information today. And I represent Nelson County, but also 4 other rural counties in the state. And I see this just as a mirror of them too. You know, it's not any different in the other 4 counties that I represent in District 23, which, like Representative Munson, is now changing numbers. But I would suggest that tourism, economic development through commerce, Parks and Rec, North Dakota DOT, get together and come up with a pilot program to do exactly this. What you're looking for is a large pilot program in Region 4.
Hey, let me pause this. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
A large pilot program in Region 4 to do exactly what you want to do. You know, I sat on appropriations a couple of different sessions, and this last session was, we love to have each of the agencies come in and present, but we hear what they need for their programs. And then we don't specifically have enough time to learn how they interface with other programs. So like tourism and DOT, and you're talking about the dams up there, get the Water Resources Board in there. You know, I mean, there is funding available, maybe if you collaborate together, that would be easier than if you try and run these independently. Rather than, you know, Sean coming in and asking for, or James coming in and asking for certain dollars for commerce to do this. Partner together, get your plan together, and I think you'll have a lot more cooperation from the appropriators. It isn't that the appropriators are sitting on dollars and they think they're theirs, right. You know. These are a group of people in the Senate, it's 14, that trying to be not fiscally conservative, but fiscally responsible with those tax dollars. Now, having said that, it's been really interesting to use the CARES Act dollars and the ARPA funding and to sit on appropriations during that time. Because I will tell you that of the $2 billion we had for ARPA funds, we had over $9 billion of requests. And those requests were not frivolous, most of them. They were from anywhere from law enforcement. We're having this problem in our town or our community or our region. We really need more of this. Or water, we need more of this. Or DOT, we need more of that. Or critical care access hospitals, or public health, or education. I mean, in a rural North Dakota, every one of those is really a high priority. There isn't one that I can think of more than the other right now, because they all mesh together, they all integrate together, and they're all important to keep your communities viable. But I would suggest that you, as different organizations, whether it's, you know, Parks and Rec, you've got a big player in this, Cody. You've got a lot of opportunities here now. And DOT, Water Resources Board, get your schools involved with this. You know, one of the best ways to get involved is get the kids involved. You know, I mean, there's just so many opportunities to partner together. And I think, Roger, that's one way that this can get off the ground. And I would be excited if I was going to be there to be part of it.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what we did in the state of Utah. So Vicki Varela, their state tourism director, I actually sat down with them, and it was the state tourism. It was Department of Commerce, which they're part of in Utah as well. it was DOT because that's wayfinding and signage and roads and everything. And it was Main Street and it was state recreation there, for you, it could be the water boards. Exactly. We got them all in the same room and it made a big difference. And that's what we also did in Nevada. And so in all of those cases, yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's getting them. So once we write this plan, I think the next step, because in this plan, it's going to have initiatives for DOT, for commerce, for tourism. I'm talking about the different departments under commerce, and everybody plays a role. It takes a community to make all this stuff happen. And I think you're exactly right. I think this could be a great pilot program to do that.
And I think that there's opportunities out there, when we look at the population in our rural areas, we know it's getting less and we know that the urban is getting more. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And in my area, I think one of the big reasons is healthcare. I see people my age and older, or even younger. We don't have the specialists in our areas to take care of some of the healthcare needs right now. So people move to either closer to family who can help with those healthcare needs or closer to those specialty providers that you can only find in, I call them the big four now. Now, Jamestown might be part of that, and Dickinson might be part of that, Williston maybe too now. But most of those reasons people move is healthcare right now in a rural area.
Yeah.
And access to healthcare in a timely manner. The positive thing I have to say, Roger, about this is we in the rural areas in my part of the state have excellent volunteer emergency services, whether it's EMS or fire. And I cannot tell you how important those are. And those are some of the things that people ask about when they come to move to an area. What do you have? Do you have access to a hospital? Do you have a hospital here? No. We have a clinic so many days a week. Oh, that's good. Do you have EMS? Yeah, those. And so there's another aspect of all of this that young families ask for. The other interesting thing, and I don't mean to take too much time, but several years ago when I first got in the legislature, I was part of a bill with Senator Judy Leon out of Fargo to try and get some, what should I say, access to midwives. Because in my area, we were 40 to 60 miles from any kind of OBGYNs and delivery services. And how can you economically develop your community when you don't have access to that for young families? And so there's so much going on in rural North Dakota. I'm just so excited that Region 4 is looking into this because I think it has so much potential for the improvement of the lives out here, but also the viability of Region 4 going forward.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, really, really good comments. And, and I got to tell you, when we went into Nelson County, which the total population is like 3,000, we were blown away. The terrain changed, everything changed. It was just incredible. I go, wow, what a great place to live. That's what was my first thing, not just visit, but to live. And then, I don't know if you get over into the Devil's Lake area and all that, and that kind of overshadows a lot of Nelson County and the other counties. But you're right, the opportunities are there. But you're right, those are all those little things like the midwives. I mean, it's a really good point. Those are the questions they ask. And while healthcare is really important, particularly for the senior people, I know education is really important for young people. And a lot of these smaller places are now busing their schools out of town into other towns and stuff. But yes, it's a complicated issue, but I think the program that we're outlining does work, and we have seen it work in other states. And it's just a matter of how do we get the funding for this pilot program to make this work? And that's really why I wanted to do this meeting today, because it's easy to come up with all these ideas and put them in a plan, but then who implements it? And that's why I believe regional councils are the way to do it. And then, and it can't be given money to a regional council and having them handed out as grants. It needs to be hands-on, do the work in-house for these communities. So I always say you have one chance to do it right. And that's what this whole program is about. And the plan we're putting together is a 3 to 5 year plan. I don't believe you do a 20-year plan unless you have a big project in there. But I think a 3-year plan that you revisit every 2 years for the, now you go through, here's our 3-year to-do list. And then you say, what's our next list? At year 2.5 is when you start making the next list. Otherwise, what happens is it fades over time. And I've been doing this for 40 some years, and I know what works and what doesn't work. And that's why I don't want to do a bunch of pie in the sky things. And I don't want to give Don a plan that sits on a shelf because there's no way to fund it. And so, yeah, I think when we get this plan, I think sitting down, with DOT and Sarah and her staff and other commerce departments, housing, urban development, would all be really, really important because everybody plays a role. This is not just about Region 4.
I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I'm so appreciative of everyone investing 2.5 hours with us and just getting up to speed on what we've been up to. And we feel it's critically important for our area of the state that we, not only do this plan, but that we implement it. And I think it's critical to our economy in the northeast corner, and all of you play a valuable part in that. So
yes. And we will have this plan done by the end of May. We're going to present it locally there, but then I think this will be a plan that Sarah and her staff will play a role. DOT has to-do items in there. I just wanted to give this a state a shot across the bow that the state is included in this plan. It's not just what each town is going to do. Most of these towns can't afford to do anything. And so we're putting together quite a marketing plan for the Rendezvous region. How to get it on the map. And so it's going to be all detailed, and it'll be done in the next couple of months. And then I think it'll be important to share that with the state partners and make sure that they can help make this, to implement it. And with that, that's all I've got for today. I really, really, really appreciate all of your time. I just wanted to let you know that this is a comprehensive thing, from marketing and image making all the way down to when we get there, are you closing the sale? And that's where the homesteading comes in. So
Roger will be back in the state May 18th, 19th, and 20th in our neck of the woods. So stay tuned if you're interested we're hosting a series of workshops again and talking about the actual plan. So with that, does anybody else have anything they would like to add before we close?
And I was going to say one more thing, don't mean to take more time, but we're even, just so everybody knows, there's some terrific historical attractions in these 4 counties. But we were there in September, beginning October, and trying to get any of them open on the same day at the same time doesn't give Sarah anything she can promote at the state level. And so we're even meeting with them, say, can we have some consistent, like you're only open on Fridays and Saturdays, but it's consistent hours that we can put together a historical trail. So there's even a lot of little things that are included in this. I'm just telling you the bigger overall picture. But even if we get people there, we have to deliver on the promise. And they come first as visitors. And if we do a good job on delivering on the promise, maybe we can get them as residents and as investors. And with that, that's all I have.
I got one more question for you, Roger, before we close off. What kind of money do you think your plan would take if we came up with a pilot program to implement for this region? Because I'm thinking, we've got the Bank of North Dakota, and that's not an easy sell all the time either, but it's some big bucks if we need to come up with some kind of a plan.
In the case of Lake County, California is a rural area kind of northeast of Napa Valley. And in it, there's like 9 little towns. In their case, the county, working with the state, put $750,000 into just redevelopment. That was the whole Accelerate North Dakota program that we were talking about repositioning that. But I thought if they had $500,000 a year for 3 years, they could get a lot of these properties flipped around. We could get some marketing in place. We could work with local businesses on pulling people in the door. So my whole thing is, how do you monetize it? How do you monetize it? How do you increase the tax base? And that creates jobs and everything. So right now, I don't have it all penciled out, but my original thing was, man, I wish the state could give each of the regions with a plan $1 million a year for 3 years. But I think you could implement this and get a lot of these properties turned and everything in 3-year period with $500,000 a year. I don't think you need to do like Lake County did, where they did $750,000 a year. But our whole deal is with this money is I also will put in there, what is the outcome? What is the return on investment? I think that's important for you as a legislator, that we show that if you're going to take this kind of risk, that here's what's in it for the state and here's what's in it, in terms of tax base and jobs and, all of those things. But that's just, that's throwing out some wild numbers. I haven't penciled it all in yet, but that's what I was thinking right now. Rendezvous region has $50,000 a year, and Don scrambles for money just to, keep the regional council going. But this is all for hands-on work. It's not giving them money and then them just throwing it against things. It's to implement specific projects like wayfinding, directional signage out to find some of these tourism attractions you have, which the state needs to work on. So it's a combination of a bunch of little things all added up. So that gives you kind of a rough idea what we're talking about. And I really see this as an investment, not a bunch of grants, money thrown at something and hopefully it'll work. Make sense?
Yeah. I think that's very doable. That's a small amount of money when you look at the whole scheme of things. So especially if you involve commerce and the Bank of North Dakota is maybe a funding source for some low interest loans, things like that. What do you think, James?
Hey, if there's a will, there's a way, Chairman Munson.
And that's what you need. Where there's a will, there's a way. I think, and that's the thing. We need the will. And by the way, it's not just at the state, it's even in some of these local communities when you hear from the locals that have kind of a defeatist attitude. So we know there's a lot of work to be done on the local level where they have that same attitude.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. This has been so valuable, and I appreciate your investment of time. Time is our most treasured gift. So thank you all. Stay tuned. There's more coming.
Thank you, everyone, very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And thank you, Don, for driving so hard on this.
Yeah, you bet.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.